What if Anakin was a serial killer? What would have happened then? We pick up with Anakin right after Palpatine revealed that he is the Sith Lord. Let's begin. The transparent steel viewport of the Republic Executive Building's eastern hangar offered an unobstructed view of Coruscant's skyline. Anakin Skywalker stood motionless before it, his reflection superimposed over the cityscape. The revelation still echoed in his mind, precise and undeniable. Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord. The pieces arranged themselves like a complex circuit diagram in Anakin's mind. The unusual attention Palpatine had shown him over the years, the carefully measured words of encouragement, the subtle undermining of the Jedi Council's decisions, all components of a strategy designed to position Anakin exactly where he stood now, at a crossroads. Anakin recognized the parallels between himself and Palpatine, both maintaining facades, though of different kinds. Studying his reflection, he observed how effortlessly he could compose his features into convincing concern, a skill honed through years of practice. The Jedi Code's emphasis on emotional detachment had inadvertently provided perfect camouflage, allowing his true nature, his dark passenger, to hide behind the expected stoicism. This precise modulation of emotions, initially developed to evade Jedi scrutiny, he had extended to everyone, including Palpatine. The deception had worked perfectly, preventing the Chancellor from detecting Anakin's true nature or causing him to misinterpret what he saw as mere potential for Sith conversion. As he contemplated their shared talent for deception, Anakin's analytical mind turned to the larger implications. Through the viewport, Coruscant's evening traffic patterns formed geometric configurations against the metropolis background. He tracked these orderly movements with the same clinical detachment he now applied to processing the revelation's consequences. Palpatine had orchestrated the Clone Wars. He was the Sith Lord who Count Dooku had warned of on Geonosis, information Obi-Wan had brought before the Council, only to have it dismissed. Anakin had harbored suspicions about Palpatine's unusual interest in him for years. Suspicions now confirmed. Perhaps the Chancellor wanted him as an apprentice, or perhaps his aims were more insidious. Anakin recalled teachings that described rituals allowing Sith Lords to possess the bodies of other Force users. The Chancellor's ultimate goals remained unclear, but his immediate intentions were transparent. Palpatine, no, the Sith Lord, expected him to react in one of two ways. Either report the revelation to Master Windu, triggering a confrontation Palpatine had undoubtedly prepared for, or pledge himself to the dark side out of desperation to save Padme. Why else would he reveal himself and then allow Anakin to leave? The visions of her death. Anakin's mind shifted focus. He had researched Force premonitions extensively after his mother's death. The historical archives yielded consistent patterns. Jedi who acted impulsively on their visions invariably brought about the very futures they sought to prevent. Emotion clouded judgment. Fear initiated the chain of events. Acting on a premonition impulsively guarantees its fulfillment. The conclusion was inescapable. Joining Palpatine to save Padme would likely ensure her demise. He moved toward a durasteel bench near the hangar's edge, methodically evaluating his options. Informed the Council they would attempt an arrest, Palpatine anticipated. The Sith Lord controlled the Senate, courts, and Grand Army, while the Jedi's reputation had deteriorated. Palpatine could easily turn the Republic against the Order. A second option presented itself with elegant simplicity. If anyone deserves to be on my table, is the architect of a galactic war, Anakin decided. The man responsible for billions of deaths, a betrayer of Republic and Separatist alike. Anakin rose from the bench, decision finalized. His gaze drifted toward Coruscant's industrial sector, where abandoned manufacturing districts provided the privacy his work required. Anakin's expression remained neutral, but internal certainty aligned his thoughts with perfect clarity. Tonight's the night Anakin Skywalker saves the Republic. Preparations required precision. Palpatine posed a unique challenge, a Sith Lord with centuries of accumulated knowledge at his command. Anakin piloted his speeder toward the Jedi Temple, calculating variables. The Chancellor believed he had succeeded in ensnaring Anakin with promises of saving Padme, misinterpreting his careful performance as genuine emotional turmoil. Years of mimicking appropriate responses had convinced even the Sith Lord that Anakin's emotions could be exploited, a tactical advantage. The temple hangar received him without fanfare. Clone troopers nodded respectfully as he passed, unaware of the compartmentalized plans forming in his mind. Anakin navigated the familiar corridors with a technician's calm deliberation, mentally cataloging components necessary for the night's work. Anakin recalled that the Council expected him to report on the Chancellor's reaction to Grievous's engagement. When he contacted Master Windu, He learned that Windu and 3 council members had already confronted Palpatine after Grievous's death on Utapau, demanding he relinquish emergency powers. Unexpectedly, Palpatine had acquiesced, requesting only time to formalize the transition. When Mace asked about Anakin's meeting with the Chancellor, he offered nothing, responding with practiced blankness and ritual pleasantries. The transmission ended. The Chancellor's unexpected cooperation revealed the layered complexity of his strategy. Anakin examined the political maneuvering with cold logic. Palpatine had revealed his Sith identity only to him, while maintaining his political persona for the unsuspecting Jedi. The Council still viewed him as merely an ambitious politician, not a Dark Lord. By acquiescing to Mace's demands about emergency powers, Palpatine bought time while keeping his offer to save Padme active in Anakin's mind. The Sith Master needed Anakin distraught and desperate, driven to extremes by visions of his wife's death. A confrontation now risked pushing Anakin toward the Jedi. Palpatine needed controlled circumstances where Anakin would feel compelled to choose the dark side. The Chancellor's patience demonstrated his certainty that Anakin would eventually come to him, tormented by fears Palpatine himself had likely cultivated. A miscalculation that created opportunity. He moved through the temple with predatory fluidity, using seldom-traveled passages to reach the restricted archives. Entry required master-level authorization, supposedly impenetrable. Anakin had swiped these codes from multiple masters years ago during a security investigation. Before approaching, he patched into temple security through a maintenance terminal. Using Master Kuhn's credentials, he initiated a diagnostic protocol on surveillance systems, taking the cameras offline for 30 minutes. Simultaneously, he programmed the logs to purge all records of this maintenance cycle once it concluded, ensuring that his archive access would be erased. He entered Master Teen's access codes at the reinforced Durasteel doors, which opened silently. Inside, only an antiquated custodial droid guarded artifacts deemed too dangerous for general knowledge. Anakin easily circumvented its limited sensors, accessing a collection of millennia-old weapons, texts, and containment devices cataloged by long-deceased beings. He located the items methodically. First, a small preservation box, no larger than his palm, containing the amber-colored wrapping material. The box's intricate mechanism allowed for controlled extraction. Each strip of the material within, when exposed to air, would expand to cover an area many times its compressed size. The entire contents of this single container held enough material to line a chamber's walls, ceiling, and floor. Anakin secured 3 such boxes. The archivists used these wrappings to contain certain artifacts, but Anakin had discovered their alternative applications. For his second target, Anakin moved deeper into the restricted vault, to a section where the most dangerous artifacts were kept. There, a small pyramidal object sat situated behind several layers of security measures. Anakin deactivated them using administrator codes, retrieving the artifact with gloved hands, and securing it within a specialized container. Both items went into a tiny bag at his belt, all he needed from the archives for this special mission. His other specialized instruments remained hidden in his quarters, awaiting retrieval. Anakin exited as he had entered. The diagnostic cycle he had initiated continued to mask his movements. The scattered Jedi who maintained nighttime operations remained oblivious, their attention directed elsewhere. The Order's preoccupation with the war's conclusion provided additional cover. Vigilance focused outward, while internal vulnerabilities remained unexploited, except by him. Night enveloped Coruscant as Anakin piloted his modified airspeeder toward the industrial sector. Ambient city light faded behind him, replaced by intermittent illumination from automated processing centers. He had the navigation systems deactivated, communication systems offline, no electronic signatures to track. The cityscape transformed as he penetrated deeper into manufacturing zones. Buildings rose like monolithic teeth from forgotten foundations, their purposes rendered obsolete by economic evolution. Anakin guided his speeder into a hangar bay concealed behind damaged environmental shields. The structure had once manufactured propulsion components for civilian transports, before bankruptcy rendered it abandoned. Corporate records listed it as pending demolition, a status that had remained unchanged for 7 years. He unpacked the items from the temple archives, placing the preservation boxes at precise intervals. The amber material expanded as predicted, covering the walls and floor to form an uninterrupted barrier. Next came the tools from his quarters, specialized implements arranged with mechanical precision on a portable surface. The ritual of preparation calmed him, focused his intent. Chancellor Palpatine stood at the viewport of his private office, contemplating the ecumenopolis spreading below. The Force whispered inconsistencies, threads of probability that refused to align. Anakin Skywalker remained an uncertainty, a variable not fully accounted for despite years of careful manipulation. His personal communicator chimed, interrupting his thoughts. The blue figure materialized. Skywalker. Resolution poor, but recognizable. Chancellor, Anakin's voice carried calculated hesitation. I need your help. The visions of Padme, they're becoming more frequent, more detailed. Palpatine's expression shifted to concerned mentor. My boy, you know I will do anything within my power to assist you. I've been thinking about what you said, about the dark side, about the ability to prevent death. Anakin paused. I'll do anything to save her. Come to my office. We can discuss this matter privately, Palpatine offered, excitement carefully contained beneath his performance of concern. Too risky. The Council might be watching. Anakin glanced over his shoulder. I'm in the industrial sector. I found some place where we can speak freely. The coordinates transmitted alongside the communication. Come alone, please. Palpatine examined the uncertainty in Skywalker's manner. Nothing unexpected, merely the natural hesitation of a Jedi contemplating forbidden knowledge. The Force spoke of a pivotal moment approaching, the culmination of years of patient calculation. The Chosen One will stand beside me as my empire rises, Palpatine thought to himself as the transmission ended. He summoned his private speeder. The industrial sector awaited. The landing pad adjoining the abandoned facility received Palpatine's speeder in silence. No reception committee, no witnesses. Perfect discretion. The Chancellor disembarked, observing the decrepit surroundings with mild distaste. Unusual perhaps, but not concerning. Skywalker's paranoia regarding the Council was an asset. Anakin, he called, voice echoing through the empty hangar. No response on the comm either. Palpatine extended his senses through the Force, finding nothing but ambient energy patterns. Curious. A faint humming drew his attention, the unmistakable resonance of a lightsaber. Palpatine followed the sound through corridors of disuse, metal grates clanging beneath his measured steps. The blue glow intensified as he approached, casting sapphire illumination across the tarnished durasteel walls. As he stepped closer, he found the source, a lightsaber standing upright, its base firmly affixed to the floor, the blade extending skyward in an unbroken column of light. The steady hum of its energy filled the corridor, an unnatural presence in the stillness, as if waiting. Then he felt it, not a presence, but its absence. A void in the Force expanding toward him, consuming natural perceptions. Impossible. Palpatine turned sharply at sounds behind him, suddenly aware of his vulnerability. The needle penetrated the skin of his neck with surgical accuracy. Chemicals flooded his system, consciousness receding with unnatural speed. As darkness claimed him, Palpatine glimpsed a figure standing over him, face obscured by wrappings, a clinical specter observing his collapse with dispassionate eyes. Consciousness returned to Palpatine in measured increments. First came sensation, light penetrating his closed eyelids, pulsing crimson through thin membranes, then awareness of position, supine, immobile. Finally, memory reassembled itself. The industrial sector, Anakin's message, the void in the Force, and the needle. He opened his eyes slowly, adjusting to the clinical brightness above. Powerful white illumination panels formed a grid across the ceiling, casting no shadows in the chamber. Palpatine attempted to move his head, finding it the only part of his body that responded to his commands. He looked down at himself. His body below the neck lay completely encased in an amber-colored material, securing him tightly to a table. The same substance lined the walls, ceiling, and floor of the chamber. A continuous amber shell without visible seams or interruptions. Palpatine reached for the Force and encountered only emptiness. Not suppression or blockage, but complete absence, as if that fundamental connection had been severed entirely. The void he had sensed before losing consciousness now surrounded him completely. Don't bother struggling, a voice commented from behind him. It serves no purpose. The tone registered immediately, Anakin Skywalker, but something about it seemed fundamentally altered. No hesitation, no undercurrent of conflict. The timbre itself remained familiar, but the cadence had changed, becoming methodical, almost musical in its precision. Palpatine twisted his neck, attempting to locate the speaker. A figure moved into his field of vision, circling the table where he lay restrained. Anakin stood above him, features composed in an expression of clinical curiosity. Anakin, Palpatine managed, his voice surprisingly hoarse. What is happening? Anakin didn't answer immediately. He adjusted instruments at a portable workstation Palpatine couldn't fully see from his vantage point. Isn't it obvious? Anakin finally responded without looking up. You are secured to a table in a specialized containment chamber where no one will hear or sense anything that occurs. Why? Palpatine demanded, attempting to summon his authoritative tone. Anakin turned, regarding him with mild interest. He settled into a chair beside the table, leaning forward slightly. Because of what you've done, Anakin explained conversationally. The deaths you've orchestrated, the suffering you've manufactured, the manipulation of billions across thousands of systems. Palpatine tried calling upon the Force, but it did not answer. I told you not to bother, Anakin noted, observing his efforts with detached interest. The Force won't answer you here. He reached into his pocket, extracting a small pyramidal object. It resembled a holocron, but modified, with a pulsing gray luminescence instead of the characteristic red glow of Sith artifacts. What is that device? Palpatine asked, his eyes fixed on the strange object. The Jedi kept this secured in their restricted archives, Anakin explained, rotating the artifact between his fingers. An interesting holocron variant. It creates a void in the Force, completely nullifying Force sensitivity in its radius. He placed the artifact on the workstation. And the material covering you and everything else? It's called nullification resin. It also blocks Force abilities. An extra precaution, as I didn't know how strong you truly were. A clinical smile appeared on his face. Though now I can see you're not as powerful as I thought. Clearly past your prime. He gestured around the room. I can't access the Force either in here, but I've never actually required it for this particular activity. Palpatine's eyes narrowed. This particular activity? My work, Anakin clarified, gesturing to the amber-lined chamber. This is not how I usually do this, but your unique capabilities required adaptation. Anakin circled the table, observing Palpatine with detached fascination. You misinterpreted the darkness you sensed in me. It was never about power or hatred. It stems from a need to feel life extinguish. He paused, tilting his head slightly. When the Jedi found me, they taught me their code. I modified it to satisfy my urges. The Jedi teach that killing to save lives is acceptable, so I began eliminating those who endangered others. Anakin's movements became more fluid, animated by the recollection. It took time to perfect my technique. I quickly discovered lightsabers were too efficient, too quick for me to savor the moment. Palpatine's eyes darted to several knives resting on a tray. You're going to cut me up here? Anakin followed his gaze to the set of cooking knives on the table, then walked away from the implements with a dismissive wave. No. Knives are too messy. This room used to be some kind of kitchen. I didn't bring those here. A small chuckle escaped him. I prefer flames to knives. They're effective, less messy, and slow enough to savor. He gestured toward a fuel canister, positioned just beyond Palpatine's field of vision. A deep breath escaped Anakin, his shoulders relaxing visibly. It's calming. You wouldn't believe how liberating it is to finally drop the Jedi Act. These are the only moments I get to be myself. Anakin, I can help you, Palpatine interjected, his tone softening. I've been like a father to you. Hondo Ohnaka was the first time I tested this variety of fuel. Anakin cut in, eyes brightening with reminiscence. The pirate had to die. He was scum. He kidnapped people, sold them. You know, he spoke of credits he could offer me, even as he began burning, but it soon turned to screams. Anakin refocused on Palpatine. I've always seen through your fatherly pretense. You never detected my deception because you were so confident in your abilities, and I'm exceptionally skilled at altering my inner feelings to let people see what they want. You should have looked harder. Maybe you would have seen it. Without me, Padme will die, Palpatine countered. And how specifically would you save her? Anakin asked, eyebrow raised. The power to cheat death, it's been achieved before. Together, we can discover the ability. Anakin laughed, the sound hollow against the amber walls. How are we supposed to rediscover some mystical ability in a few weeks? Padme doesn't have much time left. Palpatine tried again. You don't understand, Anakin. I know what you're feeling. I too experienced this. I accidentally killed 2 people in a speeder accident during my teenage years and felt nothing. We are not our darkest tendencies. I can teach you to move beyond this, to not be shackled to your deep desires. Anakin feigned interest. How? We have the power to choose, to control our desires, Palpatine continued, his voice gaining strength. We can redirect them, channel them to protect what we hold dear. Even the darkest urge can be transformed into something that serves a greater purpose. Only I can truly accept what you are, Anakin. The others, the Jedi, even your wife, they would reject your darkness. Only I can be your true friend and mentor. Anakin turned around. Oh, the misery. Everyone wants to be my enemy, right? That's a whole lot of nothing. If I wanted to hear empty platitudes, I could just go to Yoda. Before Palpatine could respond, Anakin moved with sudden precision, shoving cotton into the Chancellor's mouth. He retrieved the fuel canister and began pouring the liquid over the table where Palpatine was restrained, taking care to saturate the nullification resin. His eyes lit up with anticipation, his expression shifting to one of barely contained excitement, like someone presented with a favorite meal after a long absence. Once Palpatine was thoroughly doused, Anakin stepped back, admiring his handiwork. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, the same blue blade Palpatine had glimpsed earlier in the facility. He held the blade near the fuel-soaked table, hovering it deliberately before touching it to the liquid. The fuel ignited instantly, flames erupted across the surface, engulfing Palpatine in a sheet of fire. Muffled screams penetrated the cotton gag as the inferno consumed him, the nullification resin accelerating rather than impeding the blaze. Anakin stood motionless, observing with clinical fascination. His eyes reflected the dancing flames, pupils dilated with satisfaction. Before Anakin realized how much time had passed, it was over. The Chancellor's body had been reduced to ash and char against the blackened tabletop. Nothing identifiable remained of the most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy, just scorched material and the lingering scent of combustion. Anakin collected the holocron artifact from the workstation, then set a final charge calibrated to atomize everything: the remaining equipment, the nullification resin, even the structural supports of the room itself. The timer gave him precisely 7 minutes to clear the area. As his speeder glided away from the industrial sector, morning light began streaming across Coruscant's skyline. The explosion sounded behind him, a dull, percussive thud quickly absorbed by the ambient noise of the awakening Ecumenopolis. The comlink Palpatine had used to receive Anakin's transmission was secured in his pocket, untraceable. The detonator he'd placed on Palpatine's speeder would eliminate that connection as well. No security recordings, no witnesses, no trace of their meeting. Even if authorities somehow traced the Chancellor's last movements to the industrial sector, the explosion would have obliterated any evidence. The Republic would likely blame separatist extremists, a final desperate strike at the heart of leadership. And if Palpatine had mentioned meeting Anakin to anyone, such claims would evaporate without corroboration. If questioned, Anakin could simply state the truth as it would appear. The Chancellor never arrived for their meeting. Who would believe accusations against the Republic's greatest hero over a more convenient narrative? The perfect murder committed by the perfect suspect, someone above suspicion. Anakin smiled as sunlight flooded his cockpit, illuminating his features with the promise of a new day. The passenger within him had been fed, for now. The war concluded with unexpected swiftness just a month after Palpatine's disappearance. Without leadership, the Separatist Council surrendered and deactivated their droid armies. Chancellor Palpatine's vanishing became the Republic's greatest mystery, with officials discovering his habit of traveling secretly without security or documentation. Holonet theorists offered various explanations: government conspiracy, separatist kidnapping, and one controversial claim that Palpatine was a Sith Lord killed by an unknown Force wielder. The Senate investigation reached no conclusions, and public interest faded as reconstruction took priority. Padme delivered twins, Luke and Leia, without complications during the transition period. For their safety, the infants were sent to Naboo under her family's protection, while Anakin and Padme remained on Coruscant, assisting stabilization efforts. In interim Chancellor Mon Mothma's office, representatives across the Republic debated governance reforms. The chamber buzzed with competing voices, discussing order during transition, preserving civil liberties, and careful reintegration of separatist worlds without military occupation. As arguments continued, Anakin sat in a corner, outwardly attentive, yet inwardly detached. The proceedings gradually faded from his awareness, as his mind transformed the scene into something more visceral, a vision of what might happen if they knew. In his imagination, the assembled senators, Jedi, and military advisors turned toward him, their expressions shifting from indifference to admiration. "You burnt him up good, Skywalker. The galaxy thanks you," Bail exclaimed, his tone enthusiastic. "You sliced through his deception like a vibroblade," Mace Windu added, his typical reserve giving way to something resembling respect. "The Council misjudged you, Master Skywalker." In his vision, Padme approached, her expression a mixture of fierce satisfaction and righteous anger that transformed her typically diplomatic features. "You did a good job burning the skin off that criffing pirate scum, Annie," she said, a vengeful edge sharpening her voice. "Hondo deserved everything you gave him, just like Palpatine." Interim Chancellor Mon Mothma stepped forward with uncharacteristic informality, extending her fist toward him. "You saved our democracy, Anakin," she proclaimed, as she bumped her fist against his. A true guardian of the Republic. Ahsoka appeared at his side, her smile genuine. You protected the younglings, Master. I always knew there was something special about you. The imagined crowd within the office began to applaud. Slowly at first, then building to thunderous applause. Clone troopers removed their helmets in salute. Through the viewport of the office, Anakin saw massive holograms of his face projected across Coruscant's skyline. He saw parades filling the Federal District, countless citizens from 100 worlds marching in celebration of their hero, chanting his name in unison. This is what it must feel like, Anakin thought, to walk in full sunlight, my dark side revealed, my shadow self embraced. The fantasy continued to unfold as more figures joined the celebration. Master Yoda hovered near on his chair, nodding with approval. The dark side, you defeated. The chosen one, you are. Outside the viewport, the parades grew larger. Confetti and streamers fell from the sky like colorful rain. A small transport ship flew past, trailing a banner which said, "Thank you, Anakin." Through the transparent steel, he could see his face on every billboard and holo display across the cityscape. Citizens raised their children onto their shoulders to get a better view of their savior's image. Inside the office, the applause continued unabated. Obi-Wan placed a hand on his shoulder. You did what none of us could, Anakin. Anakin looked around at the cheering crowd, the smiling faces of friends and colleagues, all celebrating the shadow lurking among them. Yes, he thought with satisfaction. They see me now. I'm one of them, in their darkest dreams. Master Yoda had a fairly normal day and donated to a non-profit organization, which was actually a credit laundering front.